I'm Tori, and today I'm going to be reviewing A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I do have this physical copy with gorgeous illustrations by Tasha Tudor, but I actually listened to this as an audiobook. I listened through LibriVox, which is a free service, and the narrator was Karen Savage, who I really like. So I actually read this book because it is mentioned in the Jumper series. In the second book, there's a character who the protagonist describes as being like Miss Minchin, and he calls her that a lot. And I wanted to see the original Miss Minchin, and now I'm sure next time I read that book, it will make the joke even funnier. So I like this book a lot. It is a very magical, wonderful tale of childhood. The protagonist, Sarah Crewe, is an amazing little girl with just the most wonderful imagination that can make any situation better, and she's just such a positive little person. I enjoyed this book a lot. I would definitely recommend going and reading it. Then you can come back and listen to my opinions. So I thought Sarah was an absolutely enchanting character, and you can definitely see why everyone thought she was a little princess. She was just so bubbly and full of life, and she liked everybody. Her imagination was so extraordinary. It was amazing to see all the different things she did, all the different creative things she imagined, and how she was able to help other people kind of imagine things too. It almost reminded me of watching A Miracle on 34th Street, where they're teaching the little girl how to play and how to have an imagination, and it seemed like she was doing that to all the little girls at this boarding school. She was such a wonderful, open-hearted person. She almost seemed too perfect to be real. She definitely had flaws. You know, when tragedy struck, she wasn't always perfect, but she handled it way better than anyone else would have. You know, she was this very wealthy little girl who had been pampered by her father, and her mother was dead, but it sounded like she didn't really miss her, she didn't remember her, so she didn't feel like she was missing anything. And she'd always had anything she wanted. Her father just spoiled her, bought her anything in the world, and it didn't make her spoiled. She didn't become snooty or stuck up, and she was still compassionate, and she would talk about it just being an accident, that she happened to be born to a family that was rich and was loving, while some people were born to families that were poor or were not loving. And she had such self-awareness and poise, and she was so mature. She had such a close relationship with her father that it caught me a little off guard how well she handled it when he died and she lost all her money and was sent to the attic in shame. And the book focused on how, oh, she's not rich anymore, she's in the attic. And they did say that she missed her papa several times, but based on how close they were, you'd think she'd just be devastated. You would expect her to handle, okay, I don't have money now, I can learn to adjust, I can learn to be a servant, people won't treat me as well, I need to adjust. And so that seemed kind of credible, but she managed to cope with the death of the most important person in her life so well. I don't know anyone who can handle grief with that much composure, and she would maybe she was crying on the inside more. Maybe it was supposed to be that she was young enough that she could imagine things and handle it and still remember her father. I don't know, but it seemed a little strange to me that she wasn't more upset by her father's death. And then I also wasn't quite sure about the character of her father, because he was obviously very loving and adored her, but then he wasn't the smartest person, or maybe just not the most mature person in the world. They described him constantly as very young, so I guess he just didn't quite know how to handle life all that well. It seemed really sad to me that he felt the need to send his daughter away when he loved her so much, and that was probably just what you did at the time. I doubt Victorian society would have let you just stay home with your father, but it seemed like they both would have been a lot more happy if he could have done that. And then he invested all of his money in the diamond mines, and they talked about how much he loved her, but he didn't really plan for her that well. You'd think that if you're going to invest all your money, you would set aside a pile to pay for her school, and he liked to buy her stuff, set aside a pile for that, but he just took all the money and invested it. And even if the investment had panned out pretty quickly, there's still a period of time in there when he wouldn't have had any cash on hand because it's all in the diamond mines and he needs to pay bills. And it was also strange that he never talked to his best friend, who he was willing to give all this money to, about his daughter, and he was so excited by the diamond mines that he never mentioned her. So maybe he liked doting on her and stuff, but she wasn't really that important to him. Maybe that's why she wasn't just crushed when he died. Maybe they had fun together, but they weren't really that close. I don't know. I did think it was really interesting to compare this book to The Secret Garden, which is by the same author. And both of these books are about little girls who grow up with not quite the complete parental picture in their life, and who then lose the parent they have and are sent to a completely different place and have to adjust to new surroundings. And I thought it was really interesting to compare and contrast Mary from The Secret Garden, which I have read my whole life and adore, to Sarah from A Little Princess. I loved seeing all the different people that Sarah made friends with. The only person she really didn't like in this series was Miss Minchin, and that's because Miss Minchin was kind of a horrible person who hated her and was also jealous of her. And it's so, like, a grown woman who's jealous of this little girl seems kind of petty, but that's the point of the character. But then I loved watching her with Ermengarde. You know, it was fun that was kind of her best friend. She could have been friends with any of the, like, popular girls in the school, but she ended up being friends with this girl who was kind of the slower one, who had a really hard time studying. And it was great to see Sarah kind of help her get more confidence and maybe learn a little bit. And then, you know, she also took care of Lottie and all the little ones. And it was nice that even after she lost her fortune, she could still take care of them and stuff. And she had to go do, they described all the horrible things she went doing throughout the streets of London, but she did still tutor the little ones. And I feel like even though that was something she was required to do, it's something that she would have enjoyed. And it was really fun to see her with Becky, and they had such a great, cute little compassionate friendship. It did bother me a little bit that Becky was so subservient to her, but it definitely wasn't something that Sarah encouraged, so that's good. And then I loved her imaginings when she got to see kind of the large family and the Indian gentleman and how much she felt invested in their lives even though she'd never met them. It was kind of like the happier, more cheerful version of The Girl on the Train, you know, when you don't actually talk to people, but you see them and observe them and start to feel like they kind of matter to you and you're invested in their lives. And then it was really fun with the way she met Ram Dass and, you know, the whole chase with the monkey and everything, and that was just so adorable. Oh, and then I loved her relationship with Melchizedek, the little mouse. You know, it was so great. It was the best name for him. Her imagination reminds me a lot of Anne from Anne of Green Gables. They both like to use big, long words. They both like romantic things and have all kinds of imagination. And Melchizedek seems like a name that Anne would have given to a mouse as well, and it was so great. And I did kind of wonder what happened to him. You know, when Sarah moved away to the Indian gentleman's house across the street, she made sure to check on all her friends and stuff. The only person she didn't check on, that the story told us, was Melchizedek. And it would have been nice. They could have gotten a little, you know, a nice little box or something and caught him and taken him over and gotten him a proper cage and gotten his whole little family. But I guess presumably he still had a nice little life living in the walls and scrounging on scraps. So this book is very magical and just this great portrayal of childhood and just the joy of living. But it is also a product of its time, and it would definitely not work if it was released today. There is a lot of class distinction in this book, and Sarah doesn't participate in this, but all the other characters kind of do, and it's kind of assumed that she deserves to have all this money and stuff. And when she loses her fortune, Becky still wants to wait on her because Sarah is someone who needs to be waited on. There's that whole scene where Sarah is so hungry and she gives a lot of the bread she gets to the beggar child, and the shop owner is so inspired by this that she gives to the beggar child too, but it's not for the sake of the beggar child, it's for the sake of the little girl who doesn't seem like a beggar, and it's because she's from a higher class, you know, and it's talking about like inner beauty and stuff shining through, but that's very much, everyone seems to also associate that with having money, and Sarah deserves to be a princess and have money and have wealth and status. And because this better person gave charitably to a poor starving girl, now the baker will take care of the poor starving girl, but she wouldn't just do it for the poor starving girl's sake, because who wants to take care of a poor starving girl? And so that seemed a little bit strange to me. It was also kind of weird when Sarah met Ram Dass and she was just so pleased to have someone bowing and scraping at her feet like she was so used to when she lived in India and had the house full of servants and stuff. And it just seemed like there was a very strong class divide, which makes sense because, I mean, at that time in England there was a very strong class divide and people would have thought that someone with more money was better than someone without, kind of. It just wouldn't quite work for today. Another thing that really wouldn't work today is to have a middle-aged man so fascinated by a little girl and to have all these adult men crawling into her bedroom through the skylight while she's asleep. That's the kind of thing that it's an adorable, sweet story. And if they remade it, they would definitely have to do something different, because if this story was made today, it'd be really hard to make that not seem creepy. So I do think a lot of the central messages of this book do still stand up today. You know, this book is really just about how important it is to look at life in a positive way and to be grateful for what you have and try to share it with other people, and just the power of imagination and how much your perspective can change the way you look at the world and make you and everyone else around you happy. So I really enjoyed this book and I thought it was very sweet.